Hi, Melissa and Melissa coming to you again today. We are going to talk about migraines and headaches.
Ugh.
I know, what a huge subject.
Huge.
Both of us will be sharing some of our own experiences and talking about some of the triggers, um, why we get headaches, right? And why we can get migraines, what the difference is, and to potentially give you some thought processes around how to address these for yourself, right? That's the end goal of our conversations is yes, to talk about things that other people don't want to talk about, but to
Just
also
get on
give
in
you,
there.
yeah, to give you real tools that you can use and real thought processes, ways of thinking about something to come to a conclusion that can really help you.
Well,
Awesome.
and I think too, Melissa, unfortunately, what I've seen is people just think, like, and I know I went through this, so I guess I'll share my background story, and I know you have a story around these too. So I was getting headaches. I mean, like migraines, I can remember as early as like 7, 8 years old.
Mm,
Ones that were, in bed, missing,
mm-hmm.
activities, missing school,
Mm-hmm.
the nausea, all the things,
Yeah.
and just that intense pain. And for me, they went on like that for years and years and years. And, what I discovered, traditional medicine wanted to just medicate me, right? So I want to say, I don't know how old I was, maybe 14, 15. One doctor wanted to just try putting me on birth control because they thought maybe it was a hormone issue. That maybe lasted a week because that was making me feel just crazy. So
Mm.
okay, we hopped off that. Then I got a little older. They wanted to try Botox injections in my skull.
Ugh.
Right. We said no to that. My mom said no because there was a concern around facial paralysis, which freaked me out as an insecure teenager, right? Then by the time I was 20, 21, they were so severe that I was probably in bed at least 2 to 4 days, some weeks, um, really missing out on life.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried a low dose of, I want to say, maybe Prozac or something,
Okay.
to try to, all that did was make me sleep. I remember I was in New York, doing like a guest thing with Alvin Ailey, and I slept for like days. And
Mm.
I remember texting my mom and just saying, like, I really can't do this. Like, this stuff is not working. And she said, all
Yeah.
right, then stop taking it. And it was a lot of trial and error to the point where, I mean, then they were questioning brain tumors. Like, because the
Oi.
only solution was the headaches were so bad, I was going to the ER,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'd shoot me up with Demerol, send me home. They had me on Imitrex for if they showed up. I was on Furoset, which made me like completely non-functional. Just the amount of drugs they were willing to peddle, I mean, it was crazy. And, it was this weird cycle of like, then the rebound headaches would come. It was just nonstop. And I remember thinking, like, this cannot be what life is about. Like, if
Mm.
this is the rest of my life, I cannot do this.
Right.
And it was very depressing, and it's hard to imagine maybe feeling that way, but if you have migraines or you're a migraine sufferer, then you get that. Um, and so
Yeah.
it got to the point where when they were questioning the brain tumors, the reason why they thought that was my lymph nodes were so swollen that when I would turn my head, I had these lumps in
Mm.
my neck. Like they look like softballs. And it got to the point finally where the headaches were so bad. Oh, and then they were constantly medicating me for sinus infections
Yeah.
because it would mimic the inflammation through here. So now you've got chronic antibiotic use, right?
Yep.
So that led to candida. So,
Oof.
just this mess. And I remember my mom called my primary care doctor, brought me in. They admitted me to the hospital to try to figure out what was wrong. And they thought maybe it was meningitis. I mean, it was just insanity. And I just, as I look back now, like no one had a clue, but they were literally about to do a spinal tap. And I don't even remember what stopped them from doing it. I can't
Mm.
remember, but my best friend at the time, her mom had trained with a naturopath so she could help her kids. And I remember she just asked if she could test me for food allergies. And I was like, whatever. And I had been
Mm,
a kid who had a lot of allergies growing up. So this was not a new notion that there would be some sort of allergy. But I was just like, something's got to give. And so she ended up figuring out I was severely allergic to corn and all of its byproducts. And at the time, I was taking a nasal spray with dextrose in it.
ah,
Yeah, twice a day, right
oh,
up in there. And,
no wonder
you
your
know,
sinuses were just angry
angry
and your
and
lymph nodes. Mm,
everything, right? And so, what was crazy? So, I'm the person that if you tell me not to do something, and you know this from working with me,
mhm,
Melissa, I won't do it.
mhm,
To me, nothing is worth feeling like that. And probably because it was so far gone, but I will never understand when folks just won't give up something. So if you tell me to cut it out, like that's it, cold turkey, like that's what's happening. And so what was so I started cutting out, it was that I actually am highly allergic to chicken. Um, I couldn't do any soy, tomatoes. So it was like this first kind of initial list of things.
mhm.
And so we figured out corn was really the big trigger for the migraines because I remember I was doing really well. And then one day I made like eggs and I put a little salt on them and I didn't realize the table salt had dextrose in it. And I'm talking like within minutes, got a headache. And
Oh,
so really became aware of just
mhm.
reading labels. Then you realize how much corn syrup, cornstarch, dextrose, etc. is in everything,
Yeah.
right? Um, and that is really, yeah, definitely, it was eye opening. And
Mhm.
so once I started to shift that, though, it was amazing how quickly the headaches started to dissipate.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, obviously there was a lot more repair work to do, which honestly Melissa and I are still working on, right? But it was eye-opening how quickly the headaches went away.
Yeah.
And now if I get a headache, I can usually figure out what the heck it's from.
Yeah.
But and I know we've talked about just the processing of our food here in the US. I have a lot of clients who are like, I don't feel good when I eat gluten, but then they continue to eat it, but then they realize they're having headaches, and just inflammation. And I know you're going to dig into more of the science side of all this for everybody, but my point is, you guys, is if this is something that's going on for you, you really need to look at your
Yes.
food and your
Mhm.
supplements, because they can be a massive source of aggravation for your body,
Mhm.
right? To
Yeah.
put it lightly. And we don't think of that because we just, I mean, I know I talk a lot about like being like a child of the 90s where like all the processed food was up and coming. So it's like all this crap I was ingesting
Mhm.
that was contributing to the problem. And then just everything snowballing, right? And so we don't realize how much food can be fuel,
Yep.
or it can quite frankly be poison if it's not
Mhm.
high quality food, and it's worth looking at because I'm always surprised when people are just willing to keep taking all these medications
Mm.
and not thinking about what is the impact long term of taking all this sort of stuff, right? Um, yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's really eye opening, and I know you went through a time of migraines too, Melissa, but it's
Mhm.
so common, and I wish more doctors wanted to get to the root cause because you don't have to live that way. And I think,
Exactly.
that's really the piece because, I used to always say, I don't think there's anything worse than a headache because you really can't function, right? Especially if
Right.
you level of a migraine where you're just really
Oh,
struggling to even,
yes.
so yeah, I mean, and again, that's just like a snapshot. I'm sure more will come up as we're digging into this, Melissa. But I'd love like for you to share your story and then also like why is the food such a trigger?
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for sharing. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry that you had migraines for so long. Um, so my lovely, how can I say, story with migraines and headaches is that I would have them a lot growing up. Um, some of some of them were hormonal. Some of them, I know that now. Some of them were, quite frankly, I would forget to drink water, and it doesn't take too long to get seriously dehydrated. And so I would get headaches from that. I would get headaches from being tired, overtired. But as my multiple sclerosis kind of progressed, I started getting migraines to the place where I would have a migraine for weeks.
Mm.
And I have no idea how I functioned. I have no idea, because there were some days when this eye would go blind. Let me think. No, this eye would go blind, and this one would get kind of tunnel vision and just black and white. And I tell you what, that's a little bit scary when you've got little ones and you're trying to take care of them, and things would happen quickly. Sometimes I would go completely blind for a minute. And when I remember one time I was driving to town, I had everybody in the car, I was on the freeway, and I felt this coming on and my vision started to go, and I got pulled over and stopped before it totally left. And I must have sat there for 20 minutes or so, just waiting to see if my vision would return. And that was before the days of having a cell phone. So I was just kind of there, but when I started this journey, I had all kinds of different kinds of meds they were trying to give me. I don't even remember what they were. But the biggest clue now to me, knowing what I know, is like when I would end up in the ER with a migraine, they would give me an anti-nausea medicine and a major dose of Benadryl. That's the only thing that would work for me. And instead of looking at what is causing the issue, I mean, Benadryl is an antihistamine, right? So instead of looking for what the cause was, really trying to, like, I didn't have a spinal tap. They were going to do that to test me for MS. But they were talking about when they went in to do the spinal tap to like clip the nerves in the back of my neck. And I'm like, what in the world is going to happen? Am I still going to be able to open my eyes and talk? It was a little bit scary. And I was actually considering it, though. That scares me even more, that I even considered such a thing.
Right.
And I was just like, how do we do this? So when I started on the journey of recovery, I found that I am severely sensitive to chocolate. Can't do chocolate to this day. I was also very, very sensitive to sugar, not just sensitive as in my sugar would spike and dump, but I literally had a histamine reaction to sugar. It would give me a headache, a migraine. Chocolate, if I had something chocolate, and can you imagine telling a woman that she can't have chocolate? That's like the most rude thing ever. But within 10 minutes after I had chocolate, even a little teensy bit, I would have a migraine like no other. Those were the two biggies that caused me the really bad migraines. Chocolate was the worst, sugar was next. But when we realized that, and I began cutting those things out, it wasn't very long that my migraines completely resolved themselves. So do I get headaches from other things? Yes, we all do. But like you were saying, Melissa, is that a lot of times when we think about it and we track back, we can figure out why we have a headache, right? So I totally second the motion of checking out what you're sensitive to. Some people have histamine reactions to things or things in their environment too. Like we're talking about food. Ours were really triggered by food. It can be triggered by anything that your body has a histamine reaction to. And a lot of times we don't think about that when we're thinking about migraines because, that's not really accepted to be able to look at it that way. So, and one of the easiest ways in the world to check on your food sensitivities is to do a food sensitivity test. And my favorite is the KBMO food sensitivity test, the Fit 132. And I can put a link to that in the bottom of this video. We always put links in there for you. It's so easy. It's a home test kit, comes to your house. You actually take the sample, send it back into the lab, and then you're able to see what foods don't work for you. It's so simple. And I guess one of the biggest things for me was when I was having such an issue with it, and it was really impacting my ability to think, to be active, to take care of my kids, is I thought, is this what's going to be for the rest of my life? You know, am I going to have a stroke and that's it? You know, it got to that place. So if you're having headaches and migraines, please, please, please think outside of the box a little bit, because yes, we need a way to mitigate them in the moment, but let's figure out why it's even happening and address it that way.
Well, it's about being proactive in prevention, right? Versus being reactive. And by the way, you guys, like, you know, we both are touching upon, like, there's something bigger going on. Anytime we have any sort of pain, it's a symptom of something going on, right? And so, okay, we could say, yeah, I'm going to just take this medicine. It's going to get rid of the headache or whatever. Although you and I both know a lot of times they don't, you know, but what is really going on underneath all of that, right? And so I think that's the piece that I want you to think of, because it's easy to say that, you know, it's not a big deal, whatever, but when you really dial down into, like, all right, but why am I reacting this way? It actually is a big deal. And so, you know, and I think it's really important for people to note that, because, you know, it's not just what's happening in that moment. Again, it's the long-term impacts, you know, and what else is this going to trigger in my body? And it's crazy to me that, like, you know, they will say something like, we're going to cut your nerve, rather than, like,
can you imagine?
You know,
oh,
no,
this makes my head hurt.
Well,
to think about it.
Extreme things that they go to versus, hey, let's look at your diet, you know? And, but you know what it reminds me of, unfortunately, is like when people opt to do, like, you know, like a weight loss surgery versus like really making those discipline changes. And unfortunately, when people go that route, a lot of times the weight comes back because they didn't make the behavioral changes to actually sustain even whatever the surgery is producing, right? And so, and I'm not saying that, none of this is in any sort of judgmental way, right? It's just, if the goal is, I want to live better, which I know is my goal, you know, I don't want to be that person who's older and, like, just in a ton of pain and, like, trying to survive, because you don't have to be, right? I think it's just really important to remind ourselves, like, what are we doing, you know? And it's, I mean, I think you've got to get clarity on why you want to feel better, you know, but it's also reminding yourself there's not anything that's promoted as a quick fix is usually not, right? And I mean, gosh, I'm like, I still like that cutting the, like, nerves neurologically, like,
what is it gonna do? Oh,
right. That's insane, you know? And so I just, you know, I'm saying that because, again, like, whoever's watching, like, you know, getting to the bottom of what is going on
the why.
First. Why is this happening? And I think it's, you know, I always say, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I think if you can get disciplined around your food and your health, you can get disciplined in other areas, you know? And so it really is about, like, how do you want to live and how do you want to feel? And
I think that's
always, what comes along with that. Like you mentioned,
Mhm.
the inflammatory response, like,
Mm.
okay, so how are your joints feeling? How does your stomach feel? Like maybe the headache's like the big thing because it's like they're so disruptive.
Flashing red light.
But what else is going on if you're really paying attention to other parts of your body?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I
And
love the
shut
question that you
down.
asked. How do you want to live? How do you want to feel? Right? I love that. So when you were talking earlier about, thinking about why this is happening. So take, for example, a really common one, you know, the gallbladder isn't functioning right. So we take out the gallbladder. It's like shooting the messenger. The gallbladder is just the guy that's in trouble right now because back upstream, something is sideways, right? Same thing with a gastrointestinal, just stomach surgery.
Yeah.
It's what upstream is causing this issue to happen in the body. So
Right.
instead of modifying the messenger in essence so that you can't even uptake nutrition correctly and literally starving the body,
Right.
can we look upstream and go, okay, what's sideways here?
Right.
Same thing with like somebody who's got advanced Crohn's or something like that. And the option is given to extract part of the colon. Every
Yeah.
piece of that colon has its own job as far as nutritionally, what it's supposed to uptake. And when that goes away, your body has to figure out some way, if it can actually do it,
Right.
to fill in that space. So thinking about upstream, what is causing this instead of going, oh yeah, cut it off, cut it out, whatever. And I get that there are some times when there's an acute situation and it has to be done. I totally get that. And thank God
Yeah.
for surgeons that can help us with that.
Right.
But if it's not in that space, then how do we really look upstream and go, what's going on and how do we actually address that? Same thing with headaches and migraines. What is actually causing that to happen?
Yeah. Well, and we have to be willing to, I mean, I spend a lot of time like just looking around and seeing what is, happening in terms
Mm-hmm.
of just how people are operating, right? And
Right.
so, and I just think, and I know I've said this before, it's like this awareness of how much, uh, I guess, like I am very specific about, how I live, how I eat,
Yeah.
whatever, as you know. And so, like, for me, it's like, yeah, I just feel like this becomes something that for me, it's like the pain of self discipline, if we're going to call it that,
Yeah.
um, outweighs, the pain of like, I just think about how I used to feel
Oh
and
yeah. Yep.
all the time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
like it's easy to justify it in the moment. But once you start to feel better, and you know this after being on this journey, like I'm aware of every little something happening in my being, to the
Yep.
point where like, yeah, I don't know. And I'm always trying to figure out the reason why. And I'm always trying to be like,
Right.
right, like what more can I do in terms of self-care, right? Like
Yep.
actual self-care, not like, baloney self-care. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think like that's something that you find that once you start to feel better and you start to look at those pieces, you become so acutely in tune with what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing about that is that your body's constantly informing you of
Exactly.
what's happening, right? And so, you know,
It's learning to listen.
yeah, yeah. Which is really empowering if folks can get themselves to that
Mm-hmm.
place. And I understand like maybe some of this feels really foreign to folks who are watching, but our goal is to help you, you know, realize like, okay,
Mhm.
you don't have to, and not that everything maybe feels 100% every day, right? But you're aware of it, and then you're trying to figure out, okay, like,
Yeah.
did I eat something, or did I, miss something here, or am I emotionally processing? Something
Yeah.
I've learned for sure is that anything emotional we're going through is also gonna
That can
trigger
be
some
triggering.
physical response, right? And so,
Yeah.
we're so quick to, anytime even we get a sniffle, like, I'm gonna go run and take Dayquil or whatever, and it's like, but like, sometimes, like, as you and I have talked about a bunch, because I had a history of sinus stuff, it's like
Hmm.
all that mucus and stuff coming out is, again, another emotional release component, right? And so,
Yeah.
and a lot of stuff gets locked up in there, right? And
Yep.
it's not stuff we want to think about or even say, but I just think it really, like, even lower back pain, right? Like, how many
Yeah.
people think they have maybe something muscular going on? And you may, so, like, I'm not minimizing that, but I think a lot of times folks are not paying attention to, like, their kidneys, their liver, like, things that are trying to just detox. And so maybe that lower back pain is that, right? Um, versus something muscular going on,
Right. Right.
yeah.
Yeah. I think I think it goes back to what we were talking about. Figure out the why, figure out what's happening, and then thinking about it with an open mind.
Yeah.
So, keep asking the question why. So, for example, let me just go back to the whole gallbladder idea, right? Gallbladder attack, there's an issue there. Start asking why. Okay, what's upstream? What is actually driving this? And you can keep asking until you get to the root, right? The actual why.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be the actual why can be something we don't expect. So, for example, really thinking back around, so gallbladder, it would be sluggish bile flow. Where does that originate? That originates in the liver process. So, if the actual liver tissue has inflammation, if the cholesterol is off, if the ability to break down fats, those are clues, right, that we can see other places. So if the liver is off, we need to think about why is it off, right? Is there bacteria? Is there a parasite infection? Is there, what is actually causing that? But then going back to, is it something that's coming in through your world?
Right.
Whether it's a food or something in the water or,
Right.
whatever, it can be whatever. Or is it a toxic relationship or a toxic work environment or something that is your body is struggling with constantly that
Yeah.
is being causing a really rush flow constantly
Yeah.
of hormones that your body can't process through fast enough? That happens in the liver, right?
Yep.
So thinking about how our outside world affects our inside world. So
Right.
when we're asking what's causing this, we can go back and back and back and back and really get to what is actually causing this.
Yeah. 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 Well, again, it's always like this is a symptom of something bigger, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if we can always remind ourselves, like, if we, should feel pretty energetic and vibrant, most of
Mm-hmm.
the time. I mean, of course, you're going to be tired at the end of your day if you had a full day, but like
Right.
that level of exhaustion, sometimes folks
Mm-hmm.
think about or talk about.
Yep.
I had a friend share over the weekend. She was like, I can fall asleep anywhere, which I chuckled at. But I remember before I had cut out gluten, like, I could have, like, yeah, literally fallen asleep like anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it's, again, like, that's not a normal symptom. So,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
just paying attention to it. But I love your advice around just getting a baseline food sensitivity test,
Yeah.
and just going from there, and I know a lot of them will rank things by, like, how sensitive. So, don't
Exactly.
panic if you get a test and it says you can't eat, like, anything, remind yourself, like, that's just, you know, start with the highest sensitivity ones and just see how you feel, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my
Exactly.
period of time cutting out foods was probably over the course of 10 years, really. Um, to where it got to the point where now it's been another 10 years that I haven't eaten any of those things. But, it doesn't happen right in an instant for
Right.
most folks.
Yeah. I had a dear gal just get hers back a little bit ago. And her very favorite food, the three very favorite foods of hers were at the very top. She was very, it was an emotional time because some of those foods were things that she went to for comfort. They were comfort foods for her.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge to be able to find new comfort foods that didn't cause inflammation and reaction in her body. And now she feels so much better, and she's found foods that she feels really nourishes her that can fill that void. It's not like you have to always, go without that emotional piece too. You can find other things that can fill that for you.
Oh, totally. But it's a really valid point.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. People's attachments to foods are so,
I loved chocolate.
yeah. It's funny because you said that. I was like, eh. If you told me I could never have like a salted potato in some form, I'd be like, yeah,
Right? Think again, honey. I'm not doing that. Yeah.
yeah.
I get that.
Interesting. I was with a good friend over the weekend. I was with a bunch of good friends over the weekend, but one of them, she just went through a liver detox because, she was holding on to weight and she had
Mhm.
kind of hit a plateau. And,
Mhm.
doctors were like, well, you're over 40 and blah, blah, blah. This is just what, and she was like, yeah, I reject that. So, um, she, our mentor is very holistic. And so she was like, maybe your liver needs to be
Mhm.
detoxed. And so she, followed the protocol and just cut out foods and things and stuck to that and released an additional 15 pounds, and like, you know, but it's again, it's just being open to paying attention, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
realizing, and it was, it's powerful, I think, when you really are doing that. And I think that's always our goal, right? Is to empower you guys as you're listening to this. Like, what is going on? What is
Right.
it that is happening that I don't feel good about? And how can I change that? And
Exactly.
there's so many things you can do, which is really always the message we want to leave you with, and again, if you have these things going on, then please, feel free to, reach out to Melissa and myself, and we're here to help you. And, we want you to feel better. And we do this because both of us have been through like some pretty
Yep.
stressed out, like
Yeah.
places and physically, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I just think, we're here because we want to help you guys. We don't want you going through the same nonsense we went through. Um,
Right.
let our
And feeling
hindsight be
like
your foresight.
yes, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I
Mm,
think the key is you don't have to be on medication. You don't have to be a migraine sufferer. You
exactly.
can truly be in a
Truly
space
solve it.
like,
Mhm.
yeah, and really get to the bottom of it. So
I love that. Thanks for leaving us with that. I feel like that's leaving us with hope,
yeah,
right? That it can be solved.
it can
Love
be,
that.
right?
Love that.
And
It's
you will
awesome.
be able to survive without chocolate if you have to, right, Melissa?
Entirely. I had some by accident the other day and I didn't even recognize the taste very well. I was like, what
Yeah.
is that? And because it's been so long and it doesn't even I used to crave it so crazily. And it's, you know, I don't even want it anymore. I didn't even recognize the taste. So you can live without chocolate, believe it or not.
I know it's wild though, isn't it? The things we convince ourselves, like I could never live without
Oh,
cheese. Yeah.
you're right. So
Yeah.
I hope this has been helpful to you guys. And please reach out to us. We're here to support you. Um, but but walk away with knowing that you can figure out what's going on with your headaches, why you're having them, and the migraines, why you're having them. sometimes there are some really esoteric reasons, but the most common ones we talked about today. So if you have questions or you want to do a food sensitivity test, contact me. I'm happy to get that going for you. And I wish you the best, very best day in the whole wide world. And our love goes out to you today. Take care.
Totally. Awesome. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks. Bye.